من اون خوردن خود ندارم، چی کنم؟
خب هر روز ما با سختی هست.
رنج مرز خطر.
مخاطبان روزنامه 8 صبح می توانند خبرهای افغانستان و جهان را از دامنه اینترنتی این روزنامه دریافت کنند. همچنان آدرس های روزنامه 8 صبح در فیسبوک، اینستاگرام، توییتر، یوتیوب، اسپاتیفای، اپل میوزیک، گوگل پادکست و تریدز خبرهای تازه، گزارش‌های ویژه، مستندهای کوتاه و تحلیل‌ها را در قالب پادکست به مخاطبان ارائه می‌کند. رویدادها بر سرنوشت شما تأثیر می‌گذارند. آنچه را می‌بینید با آنچه را می‌دانید روایت کنید. 8 صبح، روایت دیروز، آینه امروز، نوید فردا.
من حق دارم که امروز بنوازم، یک آهنگ خالیدم برای بنوازم برای شما و یک آهنگ دیگه مخصوص بودای بامیان حضور شما تقدیم میکنم. با اینکه من انرژی بگیرم شما هم انرژی بگیرین، بدانم که چند نفر هستین، خوب خودتان تشویق بکنین. اگر خواستین همراهی کن، آهنگ اولم خالی ملودی است. یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. گنجها در قلب این ویرانه هاست، سنگ سنگش راوی افسانه هاست. یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. بامیان سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان. گنج ها در قلب این ویرانه هاست، گنج ها در قلب این ویرانه هاست، سنگ سنگش راوی افسانه هاست. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان. در تمدن پیشتاز هند و چین، در تمدن پیشتاز هند و چین، جاده ابریشم خاور زمین. بامیان جاده ابریشم خاور زمین. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان. بامیان گهواره زیبای شهر، بامیان گهواره زیبای شهر، نقطه وصلی تمدن های شرق. بامیان نقطه وصلی تمدن های شرق. بامیان یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اعجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان. بامیان سرزمینی شور و عشق و باستان،
سرزمینی شور و عشق و باستان، قلب کشور مفخری افغانستان بامیان، قلب کشور مفخری افغانستان بامیان، یک جهان اجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اجاز دارد بامیان، سینه پر راز دارد بامیان، بامیان سینه پر راز دارد بامیان، بامیان یک جهان اجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اجاز دارد بامیان، یک جهان اجاز دارد بامیان.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkhosh, for taking us to Bamiyan with your beautiful song by the name of Bamiyan. And it's comes a lot of remember from the Bamiyan and also Afghanistan. The Taliban's role threatens Afghans' rich history. They've destroyed artifacts before and restrict cultural activities now. They have destroyed many cultural symbols and removed music, poetry, dance, and many other traditions from the society. With reports of looting and damage to historical sites, the future of Afghanistan and also Afghanistan cultural heritage is uncertain. And it's important to find ways to protect it. For this, in this context, today we have a panel discussion with Afghan and Swedish experts that will moderate by Mr. Jesper Hor. Jesper Hor is a writer and journalist who has written several books on the subject of cultural heritage in Afghanistan and other areas. He has also made several notable radio documentaries and teach journalism at Stockholm University. I invite Mr. Jesper to start this section with the panel guest. Welcome, Mr. Jesper and the panel guest.
Well, can you hear me? Good. Welcome to the panel. And later there will be much more music, arts, poetry. But first, a discussion about the cultural heritage of Afghanistan. And I'm very happy to have such brilliant minds, such brilliant people here, both from Sweden and from abroad. In the panel is Helene Rånlund, who is head of ICOM. It's head of the Swedish section of ICOM, which means International Council of Museum, who also worked with museums for over 20 years, 21 years, right?
No, me only 10 years.
10 years.
10 years.
10
yes,
years. Well,
yes. So it's a difference.
And you're also General Secretary of the Museums of Defense History,
yes.
right?
Yes.
There, it's further away is Said Reza Husseini, who is a researcher from Cambridge University, King's College, or King's University.
King's College.
Yes, and expert in Indo-Iranian and Islamic history. And you were also surveying cultural heritage in Afghanistan on site for quite some years in the beginning of the this millennia. And we also have a BBC senior documentary producer, Kavun Kamush, right? And you are covering Afghanistan for the BBC, of course. And I just wanted to say that we will talk for around 1 hour, and then there will be some little time, maybe 10-15 minutes with questions from the audience. And as I can see and know that there are many people here in the audience who knows really a lot and far more than me, I'm sure. So, and maybe there are some people who don't know everything about Afghanistan. So we'll try to keep it sort of in the middle. And yes, so we'll start with the subject matter, which is the destruction. I mean, the event that started, well, actually, you can say it started a 20-year war. I mean, as you know, in this very date in 2001, the Taliban and their terrorist allies in Al-Qaeda destroyed the colossal Buddha statues in Bamyan, Afghanistan. And you can say that it's sort of a prelude or a foreshadowing the attack on New York 9/11. You have two big statues, big monuments that are destroyed and falls to the ground. So there has been some debate as to why the Taliban destroyed the Buddhas and what it meant. I mean, some people mean that this was a new phenomena, and other people could say that there is a long history of iconoclasm, or that in war you destroy the enemy's symbols or something like that. And also another quite important question is what these statues meant to the local people of Bamyan. And I will actually start with asking Said Reza, what can you say about this?
Thank you very much, Jesper, and I'm quite happy to be here. I really thank the organizers of this prestigious and really great, event. So when we talk about, destruction of Bamyan Buddhas in 2001, we have to basically look at it from different perspectives. So one is that the Taliban, as you said, they said that this is an Islamic act. So they do based on the religion of Islam, iconoclasm was quite common, and so and so. But then we have to know that this is all false, because we know that iconoclasm was there, not only limited to Islam, but also other religions, including Hinduism, Christianity, Judaism. And if you go even to ancient Egypt, they had it, Mesopotamia, they had it. So it was quite common things as true, but then what they did in Afghanistan, particularly with the Buddhas, it's quite new. So the, detonation, obliteration, complete destruction of, you can say, statues were completely new. So say in Iran, after the Arab conquest, particularly 7th century to Central Asia and to modern Afghanistan at that time called Khorasan and North India, we had a kind of, response to the local religious, you can say, places, but then you really don't get that much evidences written, or you can say in different material sources, that the Arab Muslims, when they come to this region, they really destroy cultural heritage. So you have only for 2-3 small sites in Bukhara, in Paikand, and in Samarkand, and one in Balkh. So for almost 200 years, you do not have a single destruction of religious monuments by the Arab Muslims in the early, you can say, in the first stage. So then what basically the Taliban, they tried to say it, there has no, or didn't have any base. And I actually wrote about it in an article in 2010, tried to show, what basically what iconoclasm means in Islam, and how basically the Taliban used an archaic, you can say, vocabulary to, in a way, justify their act. But then if we look at it properly, we can realize that this is a sheer political act. So it's quite new. It was a kind of response to the UN particularly, when they put the sanction on Taliban in, say, 2000 and then 2001 particularly. And then there's, say their requests were not accepted. There were lots of, pressure here and there. So that was a kind of, response to that. And then lots of, you can say, articles and also a book like Morgan and others, they wrote about it. So we all are very well aware about it. But then the Taliban also had a kind of, regional, say, aspect. So there is an international political aspect to this. There's a regional as well. And then the regional, or from regional, you can say, perspective, that they wanted to show basically that they are the true defenders of Islam, according to themselves, not according to millions of other Muslims around the world. And they wanted basically, in a way, to say, recruit more people from the region, more soldiers, to show that they are really the Buddha or the But, or you can say the idol destroyers. And then if you ask them, they always refer to that very famous, say, a historical narrative about Sultan Mahmud of Ghazni, who goes to Sumanat, and they say, okay, so here is the money, don't destroy this. And he says that, oh, you want me to be the idol destroyer, like But Shikan in Farsi, or you want me to be the seller, But Furush. So we want to be basically the But Shikan, destroyer of the idols. So in a different way. But then that time is different because Sultan Mahmud in Sumanat just destroyed part of Shivlingam, or basically the lingam was in Sumanat, and not the whole of it. But then this Taliban do something completely different. So this basically, if you just summarize it, is there are two perspectives. So one is an international, political kind of response to what is happening around on the Taliban, and then they want to show it. And the other one is basically regional. They wanted to get more funds, particularly, if I be very clear about it, more basically from the countries, the Arab-speaking countries in the Persian Gulf and in Pakistan, in those areas. They wanted to get more basically money and soldiers to just unify them in the name of Islam. So what they did is they just they tried to wrap it in an archaic, iconoclasm known, in that sense. So this is what we can see if I summarize. But there are lots of materials are written about it, and we can look at it. But these two things come clearly from what they did.
I wonder, Kavun, as a journalist, could you met some of the people who participated in the destruction of the Buddhas? What can you tell us about the actual event and your interviews with these people?
I think it is, first of all, thank you everyone for being here. That was, I really enjoyed the opening discussion, because it brought me back to some of the, the stories I've been hearing about the distractions. So if I begin with a little story, there is this man in Bamyan who is doing his normal life. The Taliban is not in power. He has got a small shop fixing bikes in the market, and then suddenly Taliban take control of Bamyan, and they imprison a group of people, including this man who has a very simple life. He hasn't been to school, he hasn't got educations, but he has got a very settled life, and then he is imprisoned. Sometimes pass, and then suddenly one day he wakes up and the Taliban ask all these prisoners to come and do there's a big project happening, so you have to come and participate. And this project is installing a lot of detonations around the statues of Bamyan. And it's quite shocking, because these men had no other option to say no. When I talked to him in 2014, he said, every time I pass by these caves in the mountain, I feel ashamed, because I have done something that it wasn't my my choice. So I think this tells something about different the hierarchy in the Taliban as well. Like, what I hear from the people, from the locals, is that when the Taliban were destroying the statues, they had this sort of big celebration. They were having this joy that they have destroyed these idols. It is something that they have conquered, and they are like changing the scenery. But this man also lived in the same sort of village. He didn't maybe know much about Buddhism or the history, but he didn't want to do this. So I think we see different sort of perspective within local people, those who are not in power and who are not making decisions to save or destroy. But when I look at Bamyan and the distractions of Buddhas, I see thousands of years of history, not only in Bamyan, in the country, damaged, destroyed, or disappeared in the last 3-4 decades. And that's quite shocking, because most of these cultural heritage that Afghanistan had, they could have been preserved even before the start of the civil wars. And I had always this question that why nobody cared for them, why it started after the Taliban. And you also see a lot of like the way the Taliban send a message to the outside world is also interesting, because you see all these proud moments by the Taliban when they destroy Buddhas of Bamyan and they take these pictures. There's celebrations, and it is quite a very historic moment for them that they take control of Afghanistan and they do things that they want to do and they think they are good to do. And then 20 years later, they come to the museums and they take pictures with the statues inside the museum to send a different message, which is also interesting for me because I think a lot of things that happen in Afghanistan, I think we should see it, we should see how we can translate the messaging by the Taliban, whoever is in the power, whoever is making decisions for the country. So yeah, quite interesting for me to see how things are being translated in outside world, comparing to what actions are being taken.
Yes, and one thing, we will go in a bit more about what these so-called new Taliban, what the rule will mean for the people and the cultural heritage of Afghanistan. But I just want to ask one sort of question that people always sort of think when you talk about cultural heritage, war, and revolutions. I mean, people are starving in Afghanistan right now. There is lack of everything: education, healthcare, jobs. There is extreme oppression of women. There is no accountability. I mean, the list, I could go on, the list could be endless, and we would just sit here, and I will not do that. But still, some people would ask yourself, I mean, why should we care about ancient statues or ancient coins or what's happening in an old museum when there is so much human suffering? I think still this is a question that's worth asking. And what do you say, Helene?
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and so many have come here. I'm not an expert in this Afghanistan history, but I can reflect more into a general perspective, and also working a lot now with building up also the defense or our preparedness for also defending our Swedish cultural property or heritage. I believe that the power of history is also it is a strategic power to take control over the history, the narrative, by securing history, by securing symbols of history, maybe thousands of years in this case. When you destroy something like this, you destroy the memory, the traces of history. And what we have to consider it is, what do we want our future generations to know about their history? Because in the immediate moment, of course, it is more important with humanitarian aid, but destroying cultural heritage, traditions, language, oppressing different kinds of cultural activities or national identity activities, or it is also a way of destroying a society and individuals. And I believe that this knowledge is, of course, you can say that we are aware of this, but when there is a catastrophe, when there is an immediate disaster or attack, of course you need to take care of the humanitarian needs. But in the long run, we also have to have a strategy to preserve the cultural heritage, because it is a part of the humanitarian law to have the right to have the access to your history. And in general, I'm not sure that so many people think about this, that it is actually my right to have access to my history. And artifacts, statues, places, sites, they are symbols of something very important. And I think the general knowledge is beginning to arise. Also during the Second World War, for example, Warsaw in Europe, where 95% of Warsaw was destroyed and rebuilt a lot in a way. They tried to rebuild it as it looked before, the old city. And to do that, you also need to think ahead, to be prepared to do this, because there can be armed conflicts, but there can also be other disasters. And we need to think about how to preserve our cultural heritage.
Yeah, perhaps if I'm allowed to add something on this, because when we talk about, destruction of the heritage and then what they actually mean, these problems are there. For example, I just give you an example. You can see it when you go to the UK, for example, right? I mean, you see historical cities and then all these monuments are there. Although, when even the countries in, say, economically is in reset or, the problems, but still there's a huge, there's a strong will to keep all these monuments, in the best and perfect shape. Why? Because they actually are the tangible part of, or the tangible, if you want to say it, or the most visible and feasible kind of, edifices that you can basically shape the narrative. So if I go back to this, in Afghanistan, for example, so of course we have all these problems, it's true. But then if you read Noah Harari, for example, his work, he says that, look, human being is not now fighting for food anymore, or human being fight because of what? Because of narrative. So what, our narrative basically shape our, mentality, right? So our story, your story is different, my story is different. And in the world, most of the war basically fought because of those narratives, right? The Taliban have their narrative, we have our narrative. And then, the United Nations has its own narrative. So it's like, if you go to Bamyan, for example, the people of Bamyan, they were there. And shortage of food, for example, was always there. The problems were always there. Roads were not, really well built, you can say, not really maintained well. The government didn't, pay much attention. But then why do people of Bamyan, particularly those people living around it, why didn't they destroy them? They kept them for, they basically tried to keep them, to preserve them for centuries. Why? Because basically it was the most visible part of their narrative, right? The narrative, they don't see them as Buddhas. They call it But. And then basically the Persian word, Farsi word for But, it comes from Buddha, right? And then for them is Salsal and Shahmama. Basically, it's not religious things. It's not Buddha. It's just the lovers. It's just the romance. That how they would see, that romance connects to the landscape, because you have Darre Ajdar, for example, the dragon, say valley, Bandi Amir, the lake, basically, and how that narrative basically shape the mentality, or you can say the culture, the identity of these people. So they kept them. And then once the narrative changes, like the Taliban comes and say that, look, this is against Islam, so I have a new narrative, so I destroy it. So even sometimes, you see that the hunger is there, problems are there, pressure is there, but then those are something you deal with them on the daily life. You have to deal with them. You have to, otherwise, die. It's true. But then sometimes narratives are so powerful that you can see them. And then why we should, for example, say that, if you ask me that why we do this, is because those narratives shape our identity. The very reason for what we are working, we existing, we try to defend our values and so and so. So that's one of the main issues that they should be, right? Taken serious in discussions.
Yes, and I would like to add also that it also shapes our future.
Exactly.
Because if they are destroyed, if they are erased, then the memory will be erased, as archives can be erased, as literature, traditions, languages. And so it is important, even if societies develops, nations perhaps develops in different ways during centuries, it is a need for showing respect for history and for each other's history and different narratives.
I agree. I just want to say that sometimes there is a bit paradoxical that, who in the world knew about the Buddhas before the Taliban started to destroy them? So sometimes, even though they try to erase something by destroying it, they might bringing these things to life in a sort of strange way, which reminds me that I want to ask you, Said, also, could you just say something about the time when these ancient statues were erected? I mean, there was an ancient time where there lived like thousands of monks in these caves. You see here is all the caves. You who haven't been there, I mean, there is, I don't know, thousands and thousands of caves. And just tell us a little bit about that ancient culture.
Thanks for asking this question. It's quite important, So first of all, Bamyan, if you look at it from, like Google Earth, say Google Map, if you zoom on it, you see it's just like valleys, not that much green, except, where you see in front of the Buddha. And then, but if you look at it, zoom it and zoom out, then you see this is precisely, between basically northern part of Afghanistan and then India to the south. So that part, now Pakistan, right? So it's just right on the route, you can say, and it goes up to Mazar-e-Sharif Balkh. It goes up, to China and Iran, connects everywhere. So it's quite important, Bamyan basically is, in terms of landscape, it's precisely on the trade route, connected India to Central Asia, to China and Iran. So that's like basically say Persia in that sense. And then, so these Buddhas basically were not there before the 5th century, you can say. So Buddhism starts in India, in North India, in Lumbini, those areas you already know. Today is in Bihar province, in near Uttar Pradesh. And then, so Buddhism basically come through, Mahayana, goes through. And in what you see basically in Bamyan Buddha, the Buddhas were there. You had two, the small one and the big one, the small 38 meters, was first built probably around the 6th century. So many people, argue this from the Kushan period, 4th century, earlier, but that's not true because now we know we have more evidences. So basically, this starts in the late 6th century, and then the Buddha, the big Buddha, 58 meters high, and then you go up to the niche. It's like almost 68 meters high, and that was basically built by say late 7th century, and almost when the Arabs were making the conquest, the Buddhas were still in construction. So there were still people were there building them, painting them, and then probably by say end of the 7th century and early 8th century, these were basically completed. So it's quite late. It's like overlapping with Islamic conquest. This is one big question. So they were there 6th century, 7th century, and Bamyan becomes very important because it's a kind of showcase as well. So you have, for example, a book called Siyu Ki or Datang Khiyuji, if you want to now read in English, is available. So it basically tells you what in Bamyan was, and then lots of Arabic and Persian, you can say, geographers and narratives are there, how they basically see it. But then this is like a Mahayana center of Buddhism. And because Balkh in northern Afghanistan today, it was a Hinayana center of Buddhism. So these two are different. And then, so here you had, a huge shrine. So like temple and all these things, Biruni talks and all other people talk about it. So it's an area that they wanted to bring more pilgrims. And then why they could build it, because if you go and look at it, it was not an agriculturally well-established area. It's a trade. So it actually, the Buddhas, whenever I write or tell my friends, I say that, look, the importance of this Buddhism is, or this Buddha statues is that a local prince, apparently, we don't know you can say the identity of this person, a local prince under the Turkic, you can say, overlordship, when the Turks were completely, dominating all this region all the way to North India. So such a things were built. And why they built? Because the trade was so well. So basically the money going, so they could basically build it. And it's important to say also that for the first time in world history, in art history, the first time that you see oil for painting used, it was used here.
Oh, wow.
5th century.
I had no idea of that.
Basically 5th century in the caves, not for the Buddhas. And then later, in 7th century, is quite established. You have, all these paintings. And also the other thing is, maybe I should just use this, platform, say it, that is in Bamyan. So you see Buddha, basically this was Buddha Dipankara, it's like standing like this. And it's quite interesting, with fires going on here. And when you look at it, it's not only about Buddhism, but it's a place that, tradition from China, from Tibet, Khotan, it's like, say, from Central Asia, in Qizil, for example, Sasane in Iran, and the local things, everything merges together. And so Bamyan, basically, one is quite important for this issue. And the second thing is, that come late, like say a little bit later, is that the earliest documents, actual documents written in Persian language found from Bamyan. The actual, the earliest one so far we have. And then also Bamyan is also very important because Bamyan had a large Jewish, inhabitant or center, basically, settlements. If you want, not settlement is the wrong word, sorry. It's basically they were part of these people, part of this culture. So it has Jewish population. This is a better word to say, and the correct word historically. And they had basically connection with Baghdad, with India, with Central Asia, and so and so. So Bamyan is not only about Buddha only, but it's all about connection, all about diversity, intercultural relation, and of course about, as the musician, just said, Yak Jahan Ejaz Darad Bamyan. We still need to know more and more about, because lots of things are there, right, to learn.
Yeah, it's very beautiful when you tell it like that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's really inspiring. You want to go back in time and see that
to
place
see what is there, right?
talk to the people and see
right?
the paintings. Yeah.
It's world history.
Yes.
It's exactly world
it's
history.
World history.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now we have to move on to a bit sadder topic. I mean, that is the Taliban, and you could say, like, briefly, you have the old Taliban, the Taliban who destroyed the Buddhas, who ruled Afghanistan from 1996 to 2001. The old guard, the Mullah Omar's Taliban. And then, as you well know, there was war and a US-supported government who ruled for 19 years, I guess, or 20. And during that time, there was also a lot of destruction of cultural heritage, a lot of corruption, but also a lot of freedom, where an archaeologist could move around the country, and you could move around the country, and you worked there, and even I was there at that time. So it was freedom and corruption and destruction of and looting. And now, very regretfully, we have the Taliban there once more, but this time, these Taliban who captured Kabul without the fight, the 15th of August, I guess, 3 years ago, they did not start to destroy statues right away. I mean, they did a lot of killing and public execution and stopped women from universities and all these. But they did not, they were careful to say that we will take care of the museum. We will not destroy it. They even took pictures of Taliban, the vice cultural minister, in front of the Buddhist statues in the museum. And they even opened a little ticket that you can go and watch there in Bamyan, and they will charge you a little bit. And they're saying they even have a task force, they say, to prevent looting. But I mean, what I wonder, I mean, these are, as we well know, this is a new world, a world of social media. They are media savvy. They have a spokesperson who speaks perfect English, and you can call them, and they have Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, and they will happily answer your questions. But you can't, of course, believe what they say. But what are we to make of this? What do they mean, and what's happening on the ground, and what can you say?
I think to start, if you go back to 2001, when the Taliban wanted to destroy the statues of Bamyan, there were a lot of negotiations going on. And I heard from a friend who told me this story, that a very rich person in London wanted to negotiate with the Taliban's foreign ministry at the time to don't destroy the statues, sell it to us, become the boot seller or boot frosh, and then we take it to London, and then we put it in Hyde Park or Regent's Park so people can come and see it. And there were lots of offers to the Taliban at the time. There were lots of efforts from European countries who wanted to somehow save. But I wonder, like, none of these negotiations, some of these offers were really bulky, really good offers. They were turned down, and we see that these are caves, actually. We don't see statues here, sadly. These are just the caves that remain. So they were destroyed. When Taliban came back to power, a lot of people are talking about this Taliban number 1 and Taliban number 2, which I think it is too soon to see to compare these versions, because again, we hear a lot in words and what are being said in statements and like sort of interviews, but what is happening on the ground and what actions are being taken, I think that is really important, that we have to observe really closely and see whether some of the promises or like these statements that are being told to media or to the international community, whether it is only for it's what they believe, the Taliban as a regime that is in charge of Afghanistan, or it is part of the efforts to get international recognition. Obviously, it is almost 30 months, more than around 2.5 years, that the Taliban is trying to get recognition from international community, and they are not really getting any answer. Even some of the countries who are sort of providing support to the Taliban now, they are not really ready to officially recognize them as a government. So when I see the Taliban in 2021 and in 2001, I ask myself that what is the idea behind these sort of change of statements? Obviously, Taliban were in power back then. They didn't get international recognition, and they were ousted from power. Are they trying to say things that they want to get international recognition and then show what they really want to offer for Afghanistan, or whether it is just that they have a new vision for the country? So these things are really, I think it might take some time to translate the things we hear from Kabul or from Kandahar or from Doha, because there is a lot of negotiations are happening, a lot of talks happening between the US with the Taliban. So I also see sometimes that the Taliban might do less sort of negative publicity for them in order to get some sort of support from, because we talk about women's rights, we talk about lack of access to education, and then let's say you also have distractions of cultural heritage or the sites at the top of it. So it might be really difficult for a regime to justify everything they are doing. Obviously, even like with the girls' access to education, it is now proving really difficult for the Taliban to justify it. But I also see when, for example, we did this story about the destruction of cultural heritage or the sites of Afghanistan. We talked about it a lot. So you see that even in this, after the Taliban and before the Taliban, this almost 20 years of gap, that there were some freedom, some access, you still see that I think almost nothing has been done there, because I heard from the previous government a lot that they are trying to preserve the statues of Bamyan. Just under those two caves, there were like these sort of big boxes, sort of like storage rooms, that the remains of Buddhas, of statues of Buddhas were there. And every time I traveled to Bamyan, they said like, well, these are kept to just put them back. It never happened. So not even during the previous government. And I think the history and cultural heritage, cultural values are not a priority for Afghanistan rulers across the regimes. There were, like, if you go to Balkh, there were like this report by Chicago University who were observing these sites. They observed 167 sites which were being bulldozed. Like, they actually brought bulldozers and all these earth-moving machineries to run over these historical sites and then destroy them. I don't know for what to get from unearthed from there, but that happened. And when Taliban came to power, it didn't stop. Obviously, it decreased from 167 to 37 sites, which a lot of people might see it as a promising thing, that, well, Taliban came and these sites are being saved. But I can dare to ask this question, that whether these 37 sites, which are still being bulldozed, even after the Taliban's takeover of power, who are bulldozing these sites? Are they those? It could be one of these three people, whether they are so super humans or superpower people who can do these things, and they don't care about the Taliban or previous regime or the US forces there across the two regimes, whether they are people who were like loyal to the Taliban back then, and they are still loyal, and they don't really have any problem because they are part of the whole system and they can do. And those 125 other people who were digging those sites, they couldn't continue. They discontinued because they had to leave, or they couldn't cooperate or work with the Taliban. Or it's just like they are lucky and they are moving all these bulldozers to the countryside and then trying to destroy. So I don't see, I hear a lot in the interviews and the statements and the conferences. People say they preserve, people say they protect, they save things, but I see little in action. And by the way, these sites are the sites that we hear about, or maybe they are too big, as gigantic as Buddhas, that are too obvious to ignore, too big in a scale that you cannot really avoid it, that we hear about them. There might be, you might know better, there might be thousands of other distractions that could happen in the country now or in the past that we don't even hear about them. And I think that is something that we have to keep asking questions about.
Yes, you mentioned satellite images, and one thing that is for sure is that we live in this new digital world, that both archaeologists, researchers, scholars, journalists can use these new digital tools to sort of survey, try to protect cultural heritage, but also smugglers, looters can, I mean, of course, there is in Facebook markets hundreds of hidden groups where you can sell and sort of buy artifacts, and also you can also go there, and there are these algorithms that if you search for looted artifacts from Afghanistan or Syria or somebody, it will automatically propose other groups that are similar. So it will help you finding, it will help connect buyers and looters, and also looters can sort of share the methods, and also you could more easily learn what these things are valued at, but also it could be used to save. I mean, Helene, you have looked into this a little bit.
Yes, and just wanted to add a little perhaps question also here, if I may.
Yes, sure,
yes,
go ahead.
Because I think one part of this is also to realize that looting and destruction is part of destroying cultural heritage, but looting and markets for selling these are also financing future perhaps wars or terrorist actions or governments that wants to continue the destruction. But also, I just wanted to ask regarding this period, is it how about who is writing the contemporary history in Afghanistan now? Because I believe that we need to, of course, preserve the ancient history, but at the same time, it is very important to also document the present, to tell what happened during these 20 years, and who is doing that, who is writing the narrative, according to you?
A lot of independent researchers and those who are really committed, a lot of people who are volunteers. We have a very good example here, like at the time that priorities were a lot of different things, but someone in Balkh goes to the sites and they started noting down. So I think there were a lot of institutions and NGOs and organizations put efforts, like we wouldn't have had these figures about build those sites if there wasn't a group of archaeologists who wanted to study what's happening. They monitored more than 26,000 historic sites across the country, which is, I think, a very significant number. It is really important. But I think who is writing the history, it is for me, it is too soon to see, because again, in Afghanistan, at least for the last couple of decades, the changes were so quick, and one regime came and then destroyed the other regime, another regime came, swallowed this, and then had their own. So there were, I think there wasn't enough time for people to come and see what happened in different eras. But at the same time, if I look at just an example about the last 20 years between the two Taliban, takeover of power, what I see is there were some levels and some efforts, but I don't see it as a very organized and a very collective effort to preserve sites or really look after some of the things that belong to this region, belong to the people of the world back in history.
Yeah.
In 2015, 14, 15, 16, you see a lot of archaeologists, they have access, they go and do a lot of research, but then the security situation gets so worse that they cannot even travel outside Kabul.
Yes.
It becomes almost impossible. So access is, I think, key. You don't, if you look at Afghanistan from 2001 and 2022, when Taliban were ousted from power, there were huge access. There were lots of efforts. And then from 2007, 8, and 9, you see that there is like it's becoming more difficult. So again, as I mentioned earlier, what we are talking about Afghanistan or statues of Bamiyan and other sites, these are just the tip of the iceberg that we see. These sites survived censorship, control, and or they were too big that like even a satellite could see it.
Yeah.
There are a lot of control and there is no access actually. Like a lot of these sites were under control of strong men who will not allow you to get close to that.
No, and that's what a part of this digital possibilities is also perhaps a paradox also there, because that's why I wanted to ask, because you can also use the digital world to create a narrative that is not perhaps in order to influence the thoughts and minds of people. And that's what we see a lot now escalating and something to be very aware of. So the possibilities with the new digital world is also to get access for a lot of people, to get access to help documenting. You can have, there are, for example, new apps who are developed for sent out to now, for example, in Ukraine and in other countries too, where just anybody, you and me, could just try to document something that is being destroyed. So you can connect it to these communities of preserving, Wikimedia and so on. And also you have new digital techniques with 3D scanning. For example, if you had a 3D scanned version of these Buddha statues, you could more easily have been able to reconstruct them. And this is now starting to develop all around the world due to experiences from also from Syria, from other countries where a lot of cultural heritage has been destroyed. So
yeah, I
some possibilities.
That's basically a great point that you raised, and also Kevin. So one thing is like about the Buddhists, for example, as you say, these studies. So we all know about French archaeologists who went to Afghanistan to 1922, and from 1922 almost to 68, and almost to 75, when the Iconium, the size of Iconium, basically the Greek city in Bactria was discovered. So there were lots of efforts, to basically map them, to register them, and Warwick Wall has written the Gazetteer of Afghanistan. So now we have a gazetteer, and then when I sometimes talk to him, he says every day we have to update it, every day, because every day we get something. And he says sometimes, when we see this gazetteer, and then we need more and more volumes, to just basically put them together, right, in a way. But then the Buddhas were basically the studies are there. There's a proper 3D scanning of it. Munich University did that. And then I was in the ministry that time because I wanted actually to come to this story of Buddha, why we couldn't do this, right? So it's like the problem, one of the major problem in Afghanistan is that, because of the situation, historical situation, lots of political things went around from 1886 till now, precisely 1865 till now. Is because of so many things happened, colonialism comes in, nationalism comes in, centralization of government, assimilationist, like a political model, imposed on this country. So it turned in this space into an ungovernable space. So whoever comes here, like try to make a government, will fail. So, I mean, how many governments failed till now? Many. How many presidents were killed? Many. How many kings were, Zahir Shah exiled, died. Amanullah Khan died, exiled, I mean, just name them. So it's like the last one, Ghani, now is in Dubai, right? I mean, just run away. So now they call him Ferrari Baba, or, the man, is just running away. So it's just name, why? So you have to ask this question, that why? And then it comes to this one, right? So it's like become a space for ungovernable, issue. You can't, why? Because the trust is gone. The trust is destroyed. So once the trust is not there, you can't build anything, right? So everything comes with the trust. The government, with people want to trust. You go to bank, you put your money because you have trust. You go to school, you put your children because you have trust. So as all things comes, and then the trust is destroyed, yeah. And then the other thing is that because of all these circumstances, so what happened, it becomes an ungovernable space, and then the trust is gone. There is a kind of disconnection with historical past. When you go to Afghanistan, when you talk to, for example, if you go around here to talk about, this building here, people talk the way that this is their grandfather, built it, or it belongs to them. There is a kind of narrative behind it. They sense of belonging is there. But then with Afghanistan, the problem because of that, all this, historical things happen, political things, happen, and the way they narrated history of this region of one perspective, one, glorious things, and then they, in a way, the governments mostly, they neglected, the other, you can say, the existence of people and historical, things. So what happened is that the trust is gone. People could not, connect back to their historical background. So when, all this registration and, say, preservation of monument, I should take care of it. It all comes if you feel, if you feel, and if you think that this is yours. So it depends, your narrative is part of your narrative. Then you decide, to save it, to keep it. Otherwise, it's not. And then, unfortunately, because of, all these things happen in Afghanistan is one thing, and is all gone, you can say. But then look, for example, the Taliban, they come in, the Taliban number 2, if you want to say it. Taliban number 1, destroy the Buddhas. Very visible, right? Huge, colossal, visible. Destroy that, immediate, say message to the world that I destroyed this. Why? Because, as I said, political, international, regional, local, perspective is there. But then Taliban number 2. So coming there, preserving, now, some, not preserving, taking photos with them, show off, look, we are so, whatever, and we are so, progressed now, this and that. At the same time, you see this bulldozering is going on, right? Same thing you saw in Syria. Same with Palmyra, for example, the north of Iraq, in Mosul, in those areas, right? Like complete obliteration, is happening. So you see that the mentality is the same. But then in Afghanistan, one of the main problem is that this space, because of this assimilationist, and I emphasize on it with capital, assimilationist form of government, political model, imposed on these people, for a long time, from 1865 till now, continuously. And the Taliban are doing the same thing, by the way. It's just they continuing what, what the government, just before collapsed was doing it. So now it's more systematically with more force, you can say. Very same narrative, very same, things. So then destroyed everything. So then this connection created. And then once this connection created, if you talk to the normal people, like many people basically over there, they feel responsibility. Like I was there. And when I was there, it was like in the Ministry of Culture, I was working. I was the youngest in that time. And I started, basically registering, like writing my notebook, this site, this, that. And I was there when the argument was going around the Buddhas. So the UNESCO people come in, all experts, of course, yes. And they all say that, look, this is our perspective. We want to see authentic material put in there. So this authentic and authentication of the things or the site, so it has many angles, different angles, right? So when once means authentic, it means we actually need these pieces to put them together, right? So that time there was money, basically, Thailand, and then some other countries like India, Japan was supposed to pay. They were ready. Munich University had a proper study, 3D scanning, and then other things. And then I was there in the Ministry of Culture that time, and then I saw there is will here, there's some will here, but there's a basically competition of power. Who's the authority to build it or not to build it? So again, you see this kind of things was happening at the same time. And other things I saw clearly when I was there, that whatever came to Afghanistan, I'm not generalizing it in sense, but most of the things I saw in that time, and we probably will agree on this point, and when you saw, Afghanistan, is defined as project. So you come there, put the project. This is a project, that is a project. And project means what? You start something, according to your funding. Once your funding finished, the period is done, you're done. Whether you got, the result is great, happy. If you're doing great, so, apply for another fund. So this basically cultural heritage in Afghanistan, unfortunately, in a way, it turned into a project. Like I was working for the Ministry of Culture. My boss, for example, or other people working, not all of them, but majority of them, they were more worried to respond to a delegation comes from outside of the country, rather than feeling responsibility to the people of Afghanistan, to the children in school, to go and say that, look, this is the story, the narrative is important, so and so, so and so, so and so, right? So like most of the times when we used to get a person coming from outside, we would be more careful to show, like the Taliban do now, more careful that, oh, look, outside they look at us like this. So see, there is a kind of paradox happening. So you respond to the outside power and not to your own people. Why? Because cultural disconnectivity has already happened. And then the project, making project, everything project, it also happened. So that's why when you go and all this, see these things, and then we are, of course, in digital age, and then the more we create awareness, the more, we show them the satellites, the more we talk about it, then it creates more, you can say, pressure. A dynamic, you can say, dialogue.
So what you can do, still, even with this horrible government, is
talk more.
Talk more. Or what would you say? That is actually the question that I've been asked to bring up. Like, what can be done even in this situation where people cannot go there and do whatever they want? What can be done from the outside by academics or journalists or museums or
cultural heritage people?
Yes.
Yes. For example, I come where I have my involvement is also working together with the other sectors in cultural heritage. It's not only museums that is cultural heritage, it's libraries, it's historical sites, of course, but also archives. Archives are really, really important also for a society to be able to reconstruct if it's needed. And there is an organization, or maybe you have heard about the Blue Shield. You can have this sign on a site or a very specific place. So it's protected by the Hague Convention, and you can actually to destroy, for example, a cultural heritage like this. It is also it is a war crime actually, and you can take this to court, and it's not yet very not used in a very perhaps successful way in so many countries, but you need to document, you need to have proof, and there you can involve perhaps more of your whole the people. And also I believe that we can also do more from the cultural heritage professional side with this Blue Shield International organization. It's like the Red Cross organization, but for cultural heritage, to learn how to work with cultural property protection in advance, to be education, and also to work together with both other civil organizations, civilian organizations, NGOs, but also formally with perhaps sometimes armed forces or so on, to really find a strategy for protecting in advance if you need. So I think the knowledge has to be spread about how to prepare for protecting cultural heritage, tangible, but also intangible, to start collecting these stories, these narratives from the people, to do also contemporary history exhibitions. So just some things from me.
And Kavun, what's your take here?
I think accountability should be the core here. Whoever the government is, whoever is in power, I think they should be put into account and they should be responsible. I don't think it is a good idea to entertain with the idea that, well, a regime destroyed a statue 20 years ago and they are back into power and they are not doing it, so we have to clap for them. I think the bar should be really high. I think every action should be questioned, and not only about today or like about very specific times of the history or our contemporary time. I think you raised about the idea of neglect. I think we shouldn't only question the governments or the rulers because they are destroying things or damaging things. We should also question the governments or whoever is in power when they are not protecting them. I think this, if we shift our idea or the way we look into the realities happening, I think it's really important that those who are in power, they cannot be in a little island living by their own selves. Now we are connected, and I think the level of dependency is really high. The Taliban in Afghanistan is now dependent to the relation to outside world. They cannot live in their own sort of sphere. The previous government was like hugely dependent to the international aid. So I think whoever supported or sent funding or sort of any communication they had, they should question these people about things that they do, but also about the things they don't do. The priorities should always be a lot of accountability, transparency, and there also should be some sort of not only sanctions, but there should be some sort of a two-way relationship that if you're not doing this is going to be the consequence. So I think accountability comes first, but I also think access is really important. Access to the field. I know that we have a lot of advanced technology. The satellite can scan layers of the Earth, but if we can't go there and see and fact check things and then see whether what we see on the satellite remains the way it is on the ground, I think it might not really help as much. So I know for research, for gathering data, it's really helpful. But I, as a journalist, want to go and see the field. I tried to go and see all these bulldozed sites, but I couldn't. So I think there should be some guarantee that these sites are accessible, protected, and preserved.
Thank you. I think we have time for some questions from the audience. Now, I can't see very well here, but maybe 3 or 4 questions, and then we have to finish, regretfully. I see somebody here, vaguely in the dark, because I got this light, raising his hand. So please.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Shabib Bouda for organizing this event, bringing you together in this panel discussion. I really enjoyed, particularly to the explanation of Mr. Hussaini. Most of the answer I received during the explanation of Mr. Hussaini. And I have a small question to Mr. Khamosh as a journalist. As I understood during your discussion, there is 2 types of destruction of tangible cultural heritage in Afghanistan. Exactly. One, accidentally destruction, like in 2001, the Buddhas of Bamyan destroyed by Taliban. And recently in Balkh, the bulldozer worked in archaeological site destroyed. And another type of destruction, it's continually destruction, silent destruction, which is not zoomed by the journalists in Afghanistan. For example, how we believe to Afghanistan future generation motivated to preserve their cultural heritage. While in the school and education system, there is not subject for learning the value of cultural heritage. I mean, this type of distraction, cultural heritage distraction, it's silent and continually distraction which going on in Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Yes, could you rephrase? I mean, if you have, is there one question? Could you?
Mr. Kaun Khamush, most of the journalists making documentary in terms of accidentally distraction, like in Balkh, in Buddhas of Bamiyan. But in between the society of Afghanistan and reality, there is going something which continuously affected cultural heritage, distracted cultural heritage. For example, in Bamiyan, there is more than 2,000 caves in Bamiyan. Most of the mural paintings, which is very famous in the world, destroyed by the people of Bamiyan, by the residents. And as you know in the picture, there is a cemetery which located close in front of the big Buddha. It's built during the past 40 years. I mean, it made by the people of Bamiyan. Still no scholar, I'm not sure no scholar, but no media and still no journalist focused on this point. I mean, do you think it still about this
Okay,
kind of
we have a question here of different kinds of distraction.
I think the systemic approaches that or efforts that has been happened or not, you might answer. But one thing that was really, I think, that maybe somehow connects all these different types of distractions is like a vacuum of power. There was a power in Afghanistan for 20 years, which was like a officially recognized government, but it didn't have a full control about, like, in all areas. There were a lot of rivalries, a lot of strong men ruled in their own region. So what I see is that lack of rule of law and lack of transparency, a lot of corruption, these all things, somehow they are interconnected. They will not I think it's difficult to invest on preserving or putting these stories into the school scripts or curriculums when it is, I think there is no sort of a very organized and systemic approach to preserve or understand or recognize these values. So I think these distractions that you mentioned, they are somehow interconnected, and they are, if I put one word as an umbrella for all of these, is lack of rule of law and lack of accountability.
Thank you. Do we have another question? You, sir? One of you, I don't know. There's.
We take the first one first.
The first one first. That's good.
We'll keep it like this. Okay.
Thank you. I have one comment and one question to the Afghan gentleman here. Mr. Khamush, you mentioned about the accountability. I work with some international organizations, and there's a discussion going on among the international community, but also among the Afghans inside Afghanistan regarding the accountability. And the discussion is that you cannot hold the regime in Afghanistan accountable to anything until it is recognized. And that's also the same argument used by the Taliban. They say, well, we are not recognized, you cannot hold us accountable to anything. So that's another discussion. But so just wanted to mention that. I question to you guys, Afghan gentlemen, what can the Afghan diaspora abroad do to preserve or strengthen this cultural heritage? I mean, despite the political or ethnical differentiations among the Afghans, what can the Afghan diaspora abroad do in order to strengthen or support or preserve the cultural heritage? So what is your advice?
Yes, I just repeat it so everybody hears. What can the Afghan diaspora do, sir?
Yeah. I think such a wonderful and important question, because we all live now outside with some, you can say, contacts within the country. But one example is this occasion, the very same occasion, right? that Zahra and her colleagues, basically all of you, put this together. So for, you can say, informing other people about the country, the landscape, history behind it, connection with other regions, and the importance for the human civilization, right? I mean, regional culture and so on. So one thing the diaspora community can really do is to talk about it more, create a kind of conversation, talk to other people, basically, particularly the society that they live in, and the way this culture connects. For example, if you ask, like when I was here, I mean, for the first time when I went to Europe, in Netherlands, when I studied, people used to ask me, where are you from, right? Such a difficult question. And how can you explain? Because you have to present yourself, right? Short, say sentence, but meaningful. Some people say, oh, I'm from Afghanistan. The moment you say Afghanistan, pictures, destruction of Bamiyan Buddha on the internet, opium, women in burqa, destruction, all these things come in front of your mind, right? So this is the way you present yourself the moment you say Afghanistan. So what I would say that, oh, do you know Alexander the Great? Everybody say, yes, of course we know Alexander the Great. You know why? Because part of our history, right? Yeah. So and I say, do you know that Alexander the Great went all the way to Central Asia? And they say, yes, of course, conquered. It was a great conquest. And then now you see on Netflix, new Alexander. By the way, is not really great historically. But then, and then what happens is, when you go, talk about Alexander, I said that, that he married somewhere in Bactria. And they say, yes, Roxana. We say, yeah, Roxana. We say, Roxana. So basically, I'm from there. So I'm not basically his brother-in-law, Alexander the Great. But I'm coming from the same place, that he was basically married, right? And then if I'm talking to academics, it depends how you, and I come to that point. And I usually say that, Aristotle. Everybody say, yes, of course, Aristotle. And then I said that, that the last word, basically, the work, found in Afghanistan. The copy of the book. So, there was a library full of Greek, work in Ayhanum near Badakhshan. And, you see to Delphi, you go to Delphi. In many of you probably have been in Delphi, to Delphi. So there was a guy, Clarkius, he actually copied things, went to Afghanistan, today's Afghanistan, that time called Bactria, and then to Alexandria Oxiana, in today's Ayhanum. And he said, I'm getting it. So this is the connection you create, right, with the people.
I could just add something to this question. Right. I think you should do exhibitions about your history. That's what I think.
And then exactly, exhibitions, yes. You can write about it, you can talk more about it. And then one more thing is just like the more you bring this conversation of connectivity, like you are in diaspora, but you're not living in an isolation because you live within the society, right? With lots of museums, things around you. You create something like this. So the more you create connectivity, intercultural relation, the way, that Afghanistan's cultural, say heritage is not belonging only to the people in Afghanistan today as nation state, say entity. It basically belongs to all human civilization, all culture. We are part of the same. And as diaspora, we are part of the same thing. All our, development, it actually comes historically through, the same, you can say, connection. And then you can talk more. So the more discussions you have, the more awareness you have. So the more awareness you have, the more, you can say things. If you go to an auction, for example, if you're in London or here around, if you go to an auction and see, for example, an object comes, a provenance is not clear, not known, date is not known, how it comes, no, ask it. So where this comes from, right? So how then auction, can sell this kind of stuff, right? Or a museum can have something like that. So it's like more, as you said, questioning. So the more questioning, the more discussion, the more, awareness, education comes in, it helps. And in the diaspora, the Afghan community, the Afghan diaspora, and of course the whole people, come from that region, I think they are in a very good position to do that. Like Khalid Hosseini does, writing, about, the stories. Like what, other people, here, the Penn, for example, Institute or other institutions, what they do, they create more and more awareness. So this diaspora can do this. And the people inside Afghanistan, unfortunately, they can't do this that much. And the effect is lesser over there. But here, the impact is much more stronger.
I think we have, how are we with time, Sarah? A little time. Could we have one last question, I think, because Sarah is giving me some angry looks here from behind the scenes. I see somewhere in the back somebody. You find somebody. Yes, please speak. It has to be the last question, so the program has to go on. Yes, please.
So much. Thank you so much.
Please.
Thank
speak.
you. Thank you so much. Okay. It's so nice to see you all here and so many people here. And I am a country near Afghanistan, a country called Tibet. Somehow one Taliban bombed this statue. I cried. I cried a lot. It not belongs to Taliban. It not belongs to Afghanistan. It belongs to all the world, world culture. So therefore, it seems like Buddha disappeared, but still, he's everywhere. Buddha is not never die. It's everywhere. The cave is there. I can see him. Still, he's there. He's everywhere. So therefore, we all Afghanistans, I'm a Buddhist. We represent human beings. We have a responsibility to inform, to exhibit, to build it up by ourselves. Nobody will come and build it. So I ask you, friends and people from Afghanistan, put your mind into it and build it again, no matter whatever comes. Thank you. That's my position.
Well, as a last word, it's not really a question. It's just a statement that we should build the Buddhas again. Well, maybe they will do one day.
Perhaps, they already did it in narrative, in painting, like Khadim Ali does this in Australia. Like, for example, other people, like at least I know Akbar, a friend of mine now was in Ukraine, did this. So in literature, in narrative, they tried. But I had this honor to be the student of Dalai Lama when I was basically in Dharamsala. And we talked a lot about this. And then, that what is basically, for sure, the people in the valley, and that's exactly comes back to that cultural heritage, things. The people in the valley, they want them be back, right? Because it's quite important. But
we have to finish with that. Thank you. I mean, it's just one final word. I want to say thank you to Sarah, thank you to you, patient audience, and to all you panels, and see you here around. Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this way?
کانال واتساپ 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه‌ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و به موقع پوشش می‌دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها، کانال 8 صبح را در واتساپ دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید. کانال تلگرام 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه‌ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و به موقع پوشش می‌دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها، کانال 8 صبح را در تلگرام دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید.
Respected and honorable audience, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for us, Class 93, to be a part of this beautiful and comprehensive program this year also. This time we are going to perform 2 songs. Our first song is from a very talented and popular artist, Shakib Jan Musaddiq. It's called Bedalil. I hope you enjoy. Let's go.
1 2 3 4
سرد و سکوت و سخت اینجا رسیده ای، از زندگی خود چیزی ندیده ای، از ترس مردم و از حرف این و آن، صد سیم خاردار دارد کشیده ای. این راه چاره نیست، فکر دوباره کن، هنجار بشکن و افزار پاره کن. من با تو هم بیا، با من قدم بزن، دنیای دیگری با من رقم بزن، با من بیرون بزن تا زندگی کنه، شب بین کوچه ها خوانندگی کنه. دیوانم بیا، دیوانه شد تو هم، دیوانه باشی ما، دیوانگی کنه. آه آه عاشق شو بدلیل، به حد و خط و مرز، بشکن سکوت را از مرز ها نترس. در عشق مرز نیست، در عشق رنگ نیست، در دنیای من جنگ و تفنگ نیست. من با تو هم بیا، با من قدم بزن، دنیای دیگری با من رقم بزن، با من بیرون بزن تا زندگی کنه، شب بین کوچه ها خوانندگی کنه. دیوانم بیا، دیوانه شد تو هم، دیوانه باشی ما، دیوانگی کنه. دیوانم بیا، دیوانه شد تو هم، دیوانه باشی ما، دیوانگی کنه. آه آه Did you like it? Okay. Our next song is a song from another popular and very talented artist, Farhajan Darya. and it's called Atan. I think most of you audience maybe heard before, so I hope you enjoy.
یک دو سه چهار.
های با یک تن اتن کی می شود، های با یک تن اتن کی می شود، این وطن به ما وطن کی می شود، این وطن به ما وطن کی می شود. گر نباشد از تو همین سرزمین، گر نباشد از تو همین سرزمین، خانه آباد من کی می شود، خانه آباد من کی می شود. بیش از این دیگر مرا مزن، میزنی بزن سخن بزن، بیش از این دیگر مرا مزن، میزنی بزن سخن بزن. یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من، یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من. صدای عشق میرسد برای تو برای من، صدای عشق میرسد برای تو برای من. خدا یکیست جان من، خدای تو خدای من، خدا یکیست جان من، خدای تو خدای من. سرود سبز همدلی صلای عشق میزند که تا گلوی تو شوم، که تا شبی صدای من، که تا گلوی تو شوم، که تا شبی صدای من. مرا به باغ می کشد ترانه ها یکی یکی، یکی برای دوستی، یکی برای زندگی، یکی برای دوستی، یکی برای زندگی. شکفته باد یاسمن، خجسته باد این وطن، ترانه های نسترن، یکی به تو یکی به من، ترانه های نسترن، یکی به تو یکی به من. بیش از این دیگر مرا مزن، میزنی بزن سخن بزن، بیش از این دیگر مرا مزن، میزنی بزن سخن بزن. یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من، یک کنار باغ نسترن، یک کنار باغ یاسمن. یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من، یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من، یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من، یک کلید خانه پیش تو، یک کلید خانه پیش من.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, you want to stand maybe. Thank you so much, the Plus 93 group. It was a beautiful play and performance as always. And now we have a short break, but before that, share this time that we have the break, I want to look at this artwork. But before that, I want to say it's a artwork from Sanas Hakimi that's already working on the end of the hall in the right side of you, and you can go and look at it. But we have short break for 15 minutes, and I want to enjoy to look at these artworks. Sanas Hakimi, as a printer and illustrator from Bamiyan, Afghanistan, she holds a BA in graphic art and MA in illustration from the University of Tehran, Iran. Sanas has been an active artist since 2005, and her work spans across a variety of genres, including painting, poetry, ceramics, and murals. She is the new guest artist or Konstner in Oroboro, and the name of this artwork is Godfather. Go and enjoy and help yourself. Thank you. We will come back 15 minutes.
کانال واتساپ 8 صبح را دنبال کنید. ما تازه‌ترین رویدادهای خبری افغانستان، منطقه و جهان را به گونه موثق، متوازن و به موقع پوشش می‌دهیم. برای دسترسی آسان به رویدادهای خبری، گزارش‌ها و تحلیل‌ها، کانال 8 صبح را در واتساپ دنبال کنید و به اشتراک بگذارید.
د 8 صبح تلګرام چینل وڅارئ. موږ د افغانستان، سیمې او نړۍ وروستي خبرونه معتبر، متوازن او پر وخت خبرو. د خبري پیښو، راپورونو او تحلیلونو ته د اسانه لاسرسي لپاره د 8 صبح تلګرام چینل وڅارئ او خپور کړئ.
من اون خوردن خودم ندارم، چی کنم؟
خب هر روز ما با سختیت.
مرز خطر.
مخاطبان روزنامه 8 صبح می توانند خبرهای افغانستان و جهان را از دامنه اینترنتی این روزنامه دریافت کنند. همچنان آدرس های روزنامه 8 صبح در فیسبوک، اینستاگرام، توییتر، یوتیوب، اسپاتیفای، اپل میوزیک، گوگل پادکست و تریدز، خبرهای تازه، گزارش‌های ویژه، مستندهای کوتاه و تحلیل‌ها را در قالب پادکست به مخاطبان ارائه می‌کند. رویدادها بر سرنوشت شما تأثیر می‌گذارند. آنچه را می‌بینید با آنچه را می‌دانید روایت کنید. 8 صبح، روایت دیروز، آینه امروز، نوید فردا.